Timestamps in the description for builds, gear, and playstyle. Okay! Wrath of the Lich King Classic has been out for almost 2 months now, and today we're going to be taking a look at bringing back the Holy of Holies from the Burning Crusade, the Shockadin. Now, Shockadin has dramatically changed since the Burning Crusade, and this build will not work if you try to play it solely like the old way of blowing up your opponent in one global cooldown. Everybody just has too much resilience, avoidance, and self-healing and wrath to do that. But since one of the most unfortunate things, in my opinion, about the modern WoW community is our reluctance to try anything that isn't posted on Icy Veins, I have been diligently attempting to bring a little bit more variety into my warcrafting by constructing this spec. Everybody and their mother is convinced that Shockadin is dead, but you're here now, so let's give it a shot. It might just surprise you, and definitely will surprise your opponents. Okay, so here it is. No fluff, we're just going to get right to the point here. I'm going to start with the build that I've been using to great success in arenas and battlegrounds and things, and later I'm going to go into a couple variants that you can try depending on your playstyle, but anyway, this is the whole thing right here. With our point split 34 Holy and 37 Retribution, I know this build looks absolutely stupid, ridiculous at first glance, but bear with me, I'm going to explain it. First, we grab 5 points in Seals of the Pure to boost our damaging seals by 15%. The mainstay seal we're going to be using as Shockadin is Righteousness for consistent auto attack holy damage, but I do swap to Corruption if there's a rogue or a druid with the off chance that I can pull them out of stealth with damage over time. After some meticulous testing, both ended up at around the same DPS, so just don't use Corruption if you can't stick on your target or you will lose a ton of sustain. Then I pick up 5 points in Divine Intellect, kind of just to go down the tree, but it does give us some decent crit and mana. 3 points in Healing Light to boost healing and the effectiveness of Holy Shock spells by 12%, which is awesome. This is a great cheap talent to pick up early in the tree. Illumination here for 5 points is mandatory for Holy Shock. And then 1 in Aura Mastery over here, which doubles the efficacy of whatever aura you have up, which is super powerful, and also makes you immune to Silence Interrupt if you have Concentration Aura up. So this is a really good talent. This comes into play almost every single fight that I'm in. Fears and dots from Warlocks chewing you up, you just double your Shadow Resist to blunt the damage for a little bit. You get 2 rogues double teaming you, you just double your Retribution Aura, and then they melt themselves with their own auto attacks. It's awesome. Then I've got 2 points in Improved Concentration Aura here. For the reduction in silence and interrupt timing by 20% as a passive, but it does have a fringe benefit of stopping pushback a little bit if we are using it for Aura Mastery or something, so kind of nice. Just something to sort of fill a tree out here, so I don't want to take any of this other stuff. Nice passive. And then Divine Favor here is another mandatory talent, but also a great free critical effect on a heal or a damaging Holy Shock. And then 3 points in Sanctified Light to increase the critical chance of Holy Light and Holy Shock by 6%. 5 points after that in Holy Power for another 5% improved critical chance on any Holy spell, and 1 point in Holy Shock to pick up the namesake of the class. Now, I put 3 points over here into Blessed Life to round off the Holy Tree. Oh no, but Blessed Life sucks! Oh my god, wrong. Blessed Life is actually a critical talent in this build, and through a lot of experimentation, this is like super mandatory for me. The whole point of this build is really to shock and surprise people with things that they've never seen before. And when you get hit with a souped up Pyroblast for like half damage, or 3 rogues are beating on you and you just kind of start tanking all of their hits, you quickly find out why this talent just rules. It is RNG, and I think people online have theory crafted it amounts to something like a 5% damage reduction on average, but you know, arenas are not about on average, they're about surviving stupid things in stupid situations, so you know, this is an awesome talent. Then we go over here to Retribution, where we have the rest of our 37 points. Start off with Benediction, which reduces mana cost of all instant casts by 10%. An incredibly synergistic talent for us because Holy Shock, Judgment, Flash of Light, Exorcism, all that's going to be instant cast for us, which will save a ton of mana in the long run. We've got 2 points in Improved Judgments for the cooldown reduction, and 3 points in Heart of the Crusader here for another 3% crit chance on our target. 5 points in Conviction after that for another full 5% crit chance with all spells and attacks. And then I put 1 point over here in Vindication, really for the junk debuff application of it. It's not reporting the right attack power here. It reduces something like 200, maybe 300 attack power, something like that, with 1 point. But reducing attack power is nice, but it's really just another debuff the enemy has to cleanse off if they want to get to your corruption stacks, or my rogue partner has like poisons up on them and they want to cleanse it. It's very annoying if you've ever been a healer and you're trying to cleanse stuff. Just having extra stuff to get through is obnoxious. After that, we go 2 points in Eye for an Eye because it is incredibly hilarious to flip damage back at your opponent. With big enough hits, if you can survive them, this will start hitting people for like 700, 800, up to 1,000, and it's just when someone takes 1,000 back at themselves when they hit you with a big attack, it's kind of disorienting for them, and it's just funny. Someone kills himself on you. It will end up actually being a lot of your damage over time, too. After that, I have 3 in Sanctity of Battle here for an increased chance to critically hit with all spells and attacks by 3%. And boost the damage of Exorcism by 15%. We're sort of starting to stack Exorcism damage here, which is awesome. And then 3 in Crusade to increase all damage by 3%. Fringe benefit there against humanoid demon elementals by an additional 3%, which is really awesome. Sanctified Retribution here for boosting the damage of Retribution aura by 50% and a flat 3% across the board damage buff to anybody affected by your auras, which, you know, you are affected by your aura, so it includes you. And then that becomes a really powerful talent for fighting melee classes. Retribution just starts tearing them apart. And then we have the mainstays here of really any kind of Retribution build, but these really, really help out what we're going for in Shockadin here. So we have 3 points in Vengeance here and 2 points in Divine Purpose. Vengeance, as any Ret Pally will tell you, is incredible because it gives you a stacking 3% bonus to physical and holy damage for 30 seconds after a crit from weapon swing spells or abilities. So this goes off all the time, and you will quickly get up to 3 stacks, getting like 9% bonus holy damage, which is awesome. Divine Purpose over here is a reduction in chance to be hit by 4% by spells and ranged attacks. And the best part of this is that it gives your Hand of Freedom spell 100% chance to remove any stun effects on the target, which allows you to self-cleanse your own stuns, remove them on anybody else just by casting Hand of Freedom on them. It's an amazing ability that I think is kind of mandatory for anybody that can go this far into Retribution, just because it turns the tides on anybody that thinks you're an easy healer to lock down and focus, or like a rogue kidney shots you and you just get out of it instantly. It's hilarious. Happens all the time. No one expects it. After that, we grab 2 points in Art of War to make Exorcism or Flash of Light become instant cast on a critical melee, which stacking all of our crit throughout all of these trees and our gear happens all of the time. And then 3 points in Judgment of the Wise to ensure that we literally can never run out of mana if you're playing it right. You instantly gain 25% of your base mana on every damaging Judgment cast, and even though we don't have the range of like Deep Holy's Judgments over here, you're almost always in melee anyway, and Judgment's 10 yard range, so it procs like every 8 seconds like clockwork. It's pretty awesome. You will never run out of mana with this. To wrap up the Retribution side of things, grab 2 points in Sanctified Wrath for the juicy 50% additional crit chance on Hammer for massive finishing blows, and side bonus of making Avenging Wrath only a 2-minute cooldown and bypasses half of all damage reduction effects while it's up. So that is awesome. Just lets your wing burst go off really hard, and nobody can really stop you when that's up, which is really cool. So to recap, we've gone far enough down Holy to pick up the amazing dual-purpose heal and ranged attack in Holy Shock, while simultaneously picking up nearly every bonus healing and critical strike chance talent that regular Holy Paladins rely on. And then we dump the rest of our points into Retribution, focusing again on improved critical strike chance and raw damage boosters over here, along with some amazing utility in Hand of Freedom, stun cleansing, nearly infinite mana regen with Judgments of the Wise, and instant cast Flash of Light or Exorcism procs with Art of War. So all of this is super synergistic, and it all functions really well when you get into the game. It's super fun. Now for glyphs over here, I went right into raw damage to really try to push the damage output of this build. The Glyph of Holy Shock is pretty much mandatory. Reduces the namesake's cooldown by 1 second. Massively helpful for healing and damage. We have Glyph of Judgment, which ensures that our Judgments can punch through personal shielding. Because remember that you only get mana returns from Judgments of the Wise if you damage whatever you're targeting. And it will give you exactly squat for mana if it's absorbed. So you need to have, anything you can get to get Judgments through shields is mandatory. And then finally, Glyph of Exorcism for another huge 20% boost to Exorcism's damage. Just, stacking 15% here, 20% here, all the other damage boosts we're getting. This is probably the most beneficial damage glyph you're going to get instead of like Righteousness or something. So this is awesome. You can play around with the glyphs if you need more survivability for your team. You could pick up something like Glyph of Salvation. So when you cast Hand of Salvation on yourself, it reduces damage taken by 20%, which is pretty nice. Or you could boost Flash of Light's crit chance by 5%, something like that. Don't go into anything like Holy Light or any of these other stupid things because you're never gonna be casting Holy Light. If you're casting Holy Light, something's going wrong. That's just not good. But you know, these glyphs are pretty much what I use, just running around the world PvPing, requesting, or to help secure my team's kills in arenas and battlegrounds. These are the most consistent ones that I've tried out. So this is awesome. A close fourth option for me would actually probably be Glyph of Turn Evil, which reduces the casting time of your Turn Evil spell by 100%, but gives it an 8-second cooldown. This basically just lets you swat away pesky Fell Hunters with an instant cast Fear on demons and undead, so they don't silence or eat your buffs or something. Another great benefit of this glyph that most people don't realize is that you can actually instantly fear Demonology Warlocks under Metamorphosis and Death Knights that pop Lichborn. You can fear them because they count as undead and demons. That works just with the base Turn Evil, but Turn Evil has like a, I don't know, like a 1.5 or 2 second cast time, so you might get silenced trying to pull it off on somebody, but if it's instant cast, you can just throw it out and fear Warlocks or Death Knights, and it's kind of funny. They can't really do anything. Also, if you shut off a Warlock's pet, like a Fell Hunter, they can't do anything to you. They can't even, you just hard cast Holy Light in their face. They can't do anything if the Fell Hunter's running around, so that's pretty awesome. Okay, so now that you've seen the sort of standard template here, there are a lot of different ways you can change up the base spec, all of which kind of depend ultimately on what kind of player you are, whether you prefer arenas or battlegrounds, and even what composition your team is made up of. For arenas, this is the build that I've switched to for a little more anti-player utility. First, I would absolutely drop a point out of Sanctified Wrath here and just pick up Repentance. We're so far into Retribution that it's almost a no-brainer to grab this. It's a really great ranged Incapacitate. Holy Paladins can't get this because no one in their right mind would ever go this far down the Retribution tree. And it's just so clutch when your team needs another stun or a pseudo-interrupt for people. Then I took 3 points out of Divine Intellect and Holy, since we don't scale as well as regular Holy Paladins with our Intellect. That lets us pick up the final point into Concentration Aura for more silence reduction up to 30%. And then 2 more points in Unyielding Faith to get out of Fears and Disorients 30% faster. This works really well in 2s, 3s, things like that, so you can help shut off people and survive a little bit more, and help your teammates survive because you're not feared to death or turn into a frog or silenced for, like, you know, an hour. Then, if you really don't want to take Blessed Life, even though I would strongly recommend against that, you do have 3 more points that you can get out of there. Besides Repentance, you could also go for a couple points in Fanaticism, even up to 3. Increase your critical chance with Judgments up to 18%. The second part of that doesn't really matter, but the regular Judgment critical effect doesn't sound that strong, but it does have a bunch of benefits for the Shockadin specifically. Only because Judgment is actually classified as a melee attack, which will guarantee more Art of War procs if it's critting 18% more, which is nice. You could also pick up 2 points in Blessed Hands in the Holy Tree over here to save on mana in tight fights with lots of blessings being thrown around, or if all your stuff's getting purged like crazy. It will definitely help you out with mana efficiency, but the real benefit of this talent is that it increases the effectiveness of your Hand of Sacrifice by another 10%. Effectively making it into like a 40% damage reduction cooldown for your team. This is a massive help since this is one of the main tools you're going to be using in combination with Sacred Shield to defend your allies and keep everybody alive. If you can split their damage in half, it's really nice. You could also put 2 points over here into Purifying Power, which reduces the mana cost of your Cleanse, Purify, and Consecration spells by 10%, and reduces cooldown of Exorcism by 33% along with Holy Wrath. This does turn Exorcism into a much more reliable damage source every 10 seconds, down from 15, and will allow your Holy Wrath to stun Warlock and Death Knight pets with increased frequency. But you should be warned, however, that, even though this sounds great on paper, I have been playing this spec pretty religiously for the last 2 weeks or so, and I found that more often than not, I'm spending Art of War procs on Flash of Light for both myself and my team, and not really using Exorcism unless I'm going for a kill, which would really make that extra 5-second cooldown, or quicker 5-second cooldown, rather, almost totally unnecessary in most situations. There's a lot of burst and a lot of high damage coming out right now, and you're going to end up needing a lot of these Art of War procs to keep yourself alive. I mean, just ask any Retribution Paladin that doesn't have their bubble. They feel really, 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 really weak without any Flash of Lights coming out, so you should really be saving these for flashes, unless your team has the enemy team on the back foot. With more resilience and team-wide survivability, or maybe even separate healers in 5s, or if you just play Battlegrounds, Purifying Power can be a lot better because it will definitely increase your damage, especially in conjunction with Blessing of Might and stuff like that. way more useful than in the 2s and 3s arena situations that I've been in. Gearing up isn't all that difficult for the Shockadin. Since we don't have Holy Guidance to boost our spell power by a percentage of our intellect, we really just need raw spell power and raw critical strike rating to make this build take off. Luckily, most of the Holy PvP tier gear is full of these two stats, so pick up your Gladiator set pieces and don't think too much about it if you're going to PvP with this. But do keep in mind that the Hateful and Deadly offset pieces that you can pick up for Honor instead have MP5 all over them. Which is sort of next to useless since we regen so much mana on our judgments through Judgments of the Wise. Instead, the hell is this guy?
3, 2, 1, go!
Okay. Where was I? Instead, I would pick up something like the Titan Forged Greaves of Salvation from the Wintergrass Marks vendor, which have crit, spell power, and resilience on them. You can then take the Gladiator Bracers and Belt if you want, if you don't have anything else, or get some great PvE plate pieces from Nax or wherever to supplement your crit and spell power output. Just remember, spell power and crit are what you need to survive and do damage. You also need to pick up at least 4% hit rating on your gear or gems, or you're going to miss half or more of your attacks and specials in PvP. Luckily, the Deadly Gladiator Necklace, Cloak, and the Ring of Ascendancy from the Honor vendor all have hit on them, which will put you right at about 4.35% spell hit rating. I'm a little bit over that because I took the Ice Walker enchant on the boots instead of Tuskar's Vitality or whatever it is. And, you know, you'll still miss occasionally against enemies like other Paladins or other classes that can take talents to reduce their chance to be hit, but the 4% is the minimum in PvP to make sure most of your damage is coming through on other level 80 players. You don't have Holy's talent to increase chance to hit, so you need this to make sure your Hammer of Justice is landing at a minimum. For gear, for your shield, the Protective Barricade of the Light is a perfect starter for this build, casting only 35 Emblems of Heroism and giving us all of our main stats. For your weapon, you can easily pick up the Titan Steel Guardian from Blacksmithing, which gives us a strong stamina boost, raw spell power, and more crit rating. Keep in mind, however, that the main problem with this weapon is that its swing speed is 2.5 seconds, which will drastically alter the number of Art of War procs that you're getting and reduce your overall heals. It will do more damage, and you will get a lot more Seal of Righteous heavy hits off with it, but you are going very slowly, so if you notice that you're not getting a lot of Art of War procs, it's probably due to your speed, or if your haste is too low or something, which mine is drastically low, so be careful with that. You can use and forgive my disgustingly filled bags here. You can pack something like the Infection Repulsor from 10-man Nax, or ideally, if you're a PvE god, you grab Life and Death or the Turning Tide from 25-man Naxxramas, which is super good. We aren't after heavy-hitting white melee damage in this build, far from it. We want fast swing times and lots of little white melee crits for Art of War and Vengeance procs, and for that reason alone, I think you opt into those faster weapons with less ideal stats, such as maybe the War Mace of Unrequited Love from the Heroic Nexus, or the earlier PvE weapons from Nax that I mentioned. Their swing timers are crazy low, around 1.8 if I remember correctly, which would effectively double the chance for Art of War, and you would gain damage as well in the process through Exorcism and whatnot. For Librams, the Holy Gladiator's Libram is good to use for survivability as it boosts Flash of Light's raw spell power. Flash of Light is your main heal after Holy Shock, and you will be casting it a lot with Art of War, so boosting its spell power by upwards of 200 depending on which version you can afford and pick up through rating is super powerful since your casts will be mostly instant. Something I noticed in testing is that the current version of Wrath Arenas that we're playing in has a 10% or so overall healing dampening effect in place. So any extra boost to your heals is very welcome, considering how much Mortal Strike spam is out there with Warriors, Rogues, and Hunters, which will reduce your heals by 50%, so this is massively, massively helpful. I also picked up the Libram of Obstruction, which is typically a Protection Paladin Libram, for 15 Emblems of Heroism to test it out, and it's actually a lot of fun to use if you don't need the extra heal buffer or if your team has really good off heals. After judging an enemy, this will boost your shield block value by 352 for 10 seconds, giving you a tiny boost to your own survivability if you happen to block. Very unlikely, but nice. And also increasing the raw damage of Shield of Righteousness, which is based on your block value, plus 520. Shield of the Righteous is a great damage supplement for when your other abilities are on cooldown, and since this Libram will proc 100% off your judgments, you'll always be shield slamming for upwards of 1.5 to 2,000 damage. Yes, you're not going to hit as hard as a Prot Pally or a Retribution Paladin that switches into a shield with all of their strength, but you will still hit pretty hard, and 2 to 3k damage is nothing to sneeze at if you don't have anything else to cast. Keep in mind that even though the damage is technically holy, it is still classified as a melee attack, and unlike Judgment, it seems to work as a regular melee, meaning that you can get dodged or parried, since we have literally 0 expertise unless you glyph into the Glyph of Corruption, which is, I wouldn't recommend doing that. It's not worth it. Shield of Righteous is just sort of like icing on the top. Other honorable mentions are the Libram of Furious Blows from the quest Return My Remains in the Borean Tundra, which will cause your judgments to boost your critical strike rating. Or if you're like me and hoard all of your gear from past expansions for some reason, you could try to use the Libram of Racking from TBC for another raw 120 spell power boost to your Exorcism casts. I think you can pick that up in the Hellfire Peninsula. Exorcism already hits pretty hard in this build with our glyph boosting it by 20%, especially if you bless yourself with Might for even more damage, since Exorcism scales equally with spell power and attack power, since Retribution actually uses it a lot as well. For your trinkets, it's entirely up to preference. I use the Battlemaster Bravery trinket and have been using this for a little while just for the raw spell power boost and the last ditch boost to health for sticky situations if you can't heal. The obvious PvP medallion, which just gives you a nice resilience boost to get you out of trouble situations. However, if you are geared out the teeth and already stacking resilience like crazy, or your partners are really tanky themselves, I would strongly recommend opting into like a big burst damaging trinket. Like, I don't really have any of them here except for Dark Moon Card Death, or maybe another raw spell power booster. This is a crappy one from Halls of Lightning. Ideally an on-use spell power thing, but you can use something like Sundial the Exiled. This didn't work so well for me. It is a lot of crit, but it only procs off of your harmful spells, and if you get yourself into a situation where you are spamming heals, Holy Shock, and Flash of Light on yourself, and you're about to die, this is never going to go off, except for if it procs luckily off like Eye for an Eye or Retribution or something like that, and there are better trinkets out there. If you are not going to be focused at all, and you can just sit there and spam Exorcism with Purifying Power or Holy Shock and Judgments, maybe this will work, but I think Dark Moon Card Death is probably the preferable option in that situation. Dark Moon Card Death can crit, and you will see it proc like clockwork on a Shockadin. I think the internal cooldown is around 45 seconds, and every Eye for an Eye, Retribution Aura, Corruption, Dot Tick, or whatever can proc this card, and it frequently will slap people for 3k, even in full PvP gear. Just a great little extra surprise for people when they start messing with you. If you've ever been hit by a rogue doing this in a stun lock, it really, really hurts, along with the hand-mounted Pyro Rocket thing. This really hurts, and it can be a great combination with your burst. You could also use something like Living Ice Crystals for more mana return, a heal that isn't tied to the global cooldown, which is very, very helpful in PvP. It all depends on if you want more burst healing or burst damage with your build. Shockadin has dramatically changed since its first iterations in World of Warcraft, and you cannot blow people up in one single global cooldown anymore. You can, however, do a lot of damage in one global, but more often than not, you're going to be playing defensively and waiting for your procs to pop, so you can keep stinging like the annoying bee that you must become in this build. So how do you play it? You want to get Seal of Righteousness and Sacred Shield up at all times, and Blessing of Kings for your self-buff more often than not. There's something to be said about self-buffing Might here instead, because of the way our damaging spells scale with both attack power and spell power, and you will absolutely do more damage with Might up, but the raw mana, health, and other stats you get with Kings are honestly more useful in my opinion. You should be using Consecration at all times if the target is in melee with you, as once you have your 3 stacks of Vengeance and a hefty amount of spell power under your belt, Consecration will tick for upwards of 300 every second. Anyone standing in that is going to start feeling it very quickly in combination with your Retribution Aura, and you can sustain Consecration with your basically infinite mana regen from Judgment spamming. Though keep in mind that this is Wrath of the Lich King, and arenas are dominated by scrub priests and shaman that like to spam mana burn and dispels, which will quickly annihilate your mana bar if you aren't careful. The original macro in the Burning Crusade for Shockadins was binding an on-use spell power trinket, Avenging Wrath, Judgment, Divine Favor, and Holy Shock to the same button, and just blowing somebody up in one global. Now, that macro still works, minus Judgment, but if you've ever played in Arenas and Wrath, you know that doing that kind of damage in the opening salvo is going to be immediately healed or shielded in some way, and then you're kind of stuck useless for 2 minutes. Even people in lower brackets right now have 20 to 25,000 health from gear and buffs, and you just can't get through that by yourself unless you're in a 1v1 situation. The difference in Wrath is, you can easily outlast anybody with infinite mana and instant cast healing. What you want to do with this build is get into a melee with your target, judging and keeping yourself alive with Art of War procs, Sacred Shield, and Holy Shock, while you build your Vengeance stacks.
And then, once you're at 9% increased holy damage, you let the macro rip and go nuts if your team is safe or you know you can secure the kill. Keep in mind, wings can't be used within 30 seconds of Divine Shield, so if you blow this macro and then get trained or stunned, you're going to be in a world of hurt unless you get a lot of Art of War procs and Blessed Life really comes through for you. This spec is a great duelist, and can beat every class in the game one-on-one. I've played a lot of duels, and I'm very confident in saying that. However, I'd classify the spec more as the ultimate representation of a battle healer. Kind of like Uther in Heroes of the Storm, if you're tunnel visioning one single target trying to kill them, especially if the enemy team has a healer, you will not break through and kill them. You just don't have the sustained damage for it. What you should be doing instead is harassing key members of the enemy team, putting up a hell of a fight with any melee that try to focus you, while your team tries to take out the other targets. Spend your Art of War procs and Holy Shocks on your allies wherever you can, while protecting them with Hand of Protection and Hand of Sacrifice. Play smart, and swap to go in for kills only when you know you have the upper hand, or you need to pressure whoever you're dueling with. This is a melee spellcaster. Yes, you have to get into their face and get melee crits for this to work at all, as well as to get mana back to sustain all of your heals and damage. The real strength of this spec lies in how powerful you are versus other melee classes. Death Knights, Warriors, Rogues, Feral Druids, and even other Retribution Paladins can hardly touch you without killing themselves through Eye for an Eye and Retribution Aura. Preg Ret is even a big fat joke compared to you, and you will destroy them one-on-one, which is incredibly satisfying. But the key to that survivability is in 1, reflective damage from your Retribution Aura, and 2, your Art of War instant casts. This means that if you don't get a lot of Art of War procs, you'll be hurting, and your team dies, plain and simple. This is why I geared and talented so hard towards spell power, improving my healing, and critical strike rating, because resilience naturally lowers your chance to crit other players, and you need a lot of it to survive in PvP. Your single target and instant heals are just as powerful as a Holy Paladin's, maybe even more so, albeit a little slower if you forego haste completely as we have here. So you need to melee, and you need to melee or judge as much as you realistically can, or you're going to be in a world of trouble. Shadow and Discipline Priests, Elemental Shaman, and Frost Mages are very difficult specs to lock down and fight with this build. But that goes for any Paladin in Wrath of the Lich King, as we are very susceptible to purge spamming and mana burns if you let them go off. But you can beat them if you're on your A game, and you Aura Dance to put up Frost, Fire, and Shadow resists. It is a massive slog due to the nature of their defensive cooldowns, shields, and all of their slows, stuns, fears, purges, dispels, and knockbacks. Plus, cycling your auras too much defensively will leave you on the back foot, as you're now way behind on global cooldowns. You're going to get purged, feared, and polymorphed repeatedly, as most people will identify you as a Holy Paladin right off the bat in arenas, and it's not going to be fun. If you partner with somebody that can purge these effects, you'll have a way easier time in fights. All I can say for these matchups is that you have to either get up on them ASAP with strong damage, or force them to come to you with terrain. Cast Blessing of Freedom on yourself to get out of Frost Nova and stuns, Holy Shock your enemy with Divine Favor for the auto crit to start making them nervous, and chase them down as best as you can. It's incredibly tough, but definitely doable once you learn the strengths of this build and start getting enough resilience, spell power, and critical strike to keep up your self heals and damage output. So that's about it for Shockadin so far. I have been meticulously testing every aspect of this build, from the gear to talents to glyphs and more for the last few weeks, and I have to say that this is one of the most fun and rewarding specs that I've ever played in World of Warcraft. Nobody has any idea what you're doing, and 99% of people will laugh at you as you charge headlong into melee, until you beat them in a duel and they suddenly want to try the build out for themselves. No matter how you build out from this core, you're a very tanky one-on-one duelist with consistent burst and AoE damage to cut through questing or PvP alike. I leveled 70 to 80 in this spec, and with good gear and good procs, you can take on 2 or sometimes even 3 opponents in PvP at the same time and live to tell the tale. Since this is a magic-based, proc-heavy, and buff-focused class at its core, you will have a very tough time initially dealing with these people that like to spam purges, dispels, and mana burns, but you can work your way up to it with practice. You have to line of sight block, spam-happy priests and elemental or resto shamans, and put them on the defensive quickly with your partner when they get to you. But if you're looking for something new to play, or maybe you're just not getting all of those 8,000 Avenger shield crits like all the Preg Ret YouTube copycats are claiming, why don't you try out some good old-fashioned Shockadin? And just friggin' nuke 'em, dude.